Savannah Lynn didn't think much of it at first. Just cramps, she told herself. Maybe food poisoning or a period coming early. She'd been studying late the night before and skipped dinner, so the nausea made sense. But by sunrise, she was curled up on the cold bathroom floor of her dorm, sweat clinging to her skin like a second layer, trembling as waves of sharp, hot pain pulsed through her lower abdomen. Her roommate, Gina, found her there around 8 a.m., pale as chalk and whispering through clenched teeth that she couldn't breathe. The university EMTs arrived fast, but the moment Savannah vomited on the stretcher, thick, dark, and laced with something that looked almost rotted, Gina stepped back, horrified. Something wasn't right. This wasn't a stomach bug. At St. Mary's General Hospital in Austin, Texas, Savannah lay under fluorescent lights, dazed and barely coherent. Her blood pressure was crashing, her fever was climbing, and her body was clenching around itself as if trying to collapse inward. Nurses checked for pregnancy. Negative. Appendicitis. Unlikely. Her heart rate spiked when one of them gently touched her lower belly. It was tender, swollen, and radiating heat. They called in an OB/GYN. Dr. Marianne Keller was seasoned, level-headed, and known around the hospital for having seen it all. But the moment she examined Savannah, even she paled. There was a smell. Not just infection. Something wrong. Putrid. Like death clinging to skin. Hold her hand, she told the nurse softly. This is going to hurt. With a gloved hand and careful precision, Dr. Keller worked inside Savannah's cervix, expecting perhaps an abscess or retained tissue. Maybe a torn IUD if Savannah had lied about birth control. What she didn't expect was resistance. Something foreign. And then it moved. She froze. The nurse gasped. Savannah flinched violently, crying out in pain, trying to pull away. But Dr. Keller was already retrieving the object. What she pulled out was a partial finger. Human. Male. Skin peeling, nail intact, bone exposed. Then another. Then a third. The nurse screamed. Savannah didn't. She stared, hollow-eyed, at the ceiling as the room spun. Her mouth opened, then shut again. No sound. Security was called. Then police. The ER shut down the entire OB wing. The room smelled like copper and rot. No one could breathe through their nose. Detectives arrived within the hour. Savannah was placed under sedation. The fingers were bagged, labeled, and rushed to forensics. The ER director asked if this was a prank. No one laughed. The attending physician who had first seen Savannah stood in the hallway shaking. She was clean when she came in, he said to the detective. I mean, externally. No blood, no signs of trauma. But that was inside her. That night, Savannah's name hit local news. By morning, it was national. The girl who went to the hospital for stomach pain and turned out to be carrying 3 human fingers inside her womb. She became an instant mystery. Was she a killer? A victim? Both? Savannah awoke the next day, restrained to her hospital bed, a uniformed officer at her door, and cameras waiting outside. She blinked slowly, confused. What happened to me? She whispered to the nurse. The nurse didn't answer. She didn't know how, because no one did. Not yet. The hospital's OB ward had gone into a quiet panic. No one dared to say it out loud, but the look in Dr. Marianne Keller's eyes said everything. She had delivered stillborns, removed dead fetuses, even treated victims of sexual violence. But nothing in her 22 years of practice had prepared her for pulling 3 rotting human fingers out of a living girl's womb. The fingers were male, adult, 2 with blackened nails, the skin sloughing off in a way that suggested they'd been inside Savannah for more than a few days. The third had a clean fracture line through the knuckle, bitten or broken off. There was decay, but not full decomposition. It was fresh rot, intimate, invasive, unholy. Savannah was sedated shortly after the third finger was removed. Her body had gone into a near shock state, shaking, sweating, unable to regulate its own temperature. Her vitals fluctuated erratically. Her white blood cell count spiked off the charts, and a scan revealed early-stage sepsis. If she hadn't come to the hospital when she did, she likely wouldn't have survived another 24 hours. Marianne stood over the tray of evidence, breath caught in her chest. This wasn't some terrible fluke. This was a crime scene. Hospital protocol demanded she notify the attending physician, then the hospital director. But before anyone could pick up a phone, someone had already done it. By 2:30 p.m., 2 detectives from Austin PD's Major Crimes Unit were walking down the hallway, their shoes squeaking against the linoleum. Detective Riley Knox, lead on the case, was calm but sharp. Ex-military, in his late 40s, eyes like sandpaper. His partner, Detective Dana View, a Korean-American woman 10 years younger, moved with silent tension. They were used to seeing people shot, stabbed, dismembered. But this felt different. Dr. Keller led them into a private room and closed the door. "We found 3 human fingers inside her vaginal canal," she said plainly. "And I have no idea how they got there." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Did she say anything about them? Explain?" "She hasn't said a word. She seems to be in a kind of fugue. Dissociative. Like her brain won't let her go back to whatever happened." View leaned forward. "Was there tearing? Bleeding?" "Some, yes. But not what I'd expect if someone forced those in post-mortem. There's inflammation, signs of infection, but no signs of recent trauma." "You're saying they've been there a while?" Dr. Keller nodded grimly. "Long enough to rot." They asked to see the evidence. The tray had already been sealed and tagged in the hospital's makeshift evidence locker, but Dr. Keller had taken a photo before packaging. She handed her phone to Knox. He stared at the screen. Close up. 3 severed fingers laid out on a sterile cloth. 2 index, 1 pinky. Discoloration. 1 with a silver ring around it, warped and nearly fused to the swelling skin. View exhaled sharply. "We need to ID who they belong to." That's when they called the forensic lab. The fingers were rushed to the state crime lab that night. DNA swabs were taken. Fingerprints were run through AFIS. It would take hours, maybe a day, but the department had a feeling this case wouldn't be slow. Back in her hospital room, Savannah stirred. Nurse Elaine Harper was on duty when Savannah opened her eyes. She was sitting in a chair by the window, reading notes and checking vitals. She'd been a nurse long enough to know when someone wasn't just sick, but broken. Savannah blinked up at the ceiling. She looked better physically, but her eyes were distant. Not foggy, empty. Elaine sat next to her and gently asked, "Do you remember anything?" Savannah didn't respond. Her lips parted, then closed. "Sweetheart, there were some things inside you." Elaine tried, choosing her words carefully. "Do you remember how they got there?" Still nothing. But then Savannah's throat moved. A soft rasp. 1 word. "Liam." But then Savannah's throat moved. A soft rasp. 1 word. "Liam." And just like that, something broke open in her mind. Not a full memory, just a flash, blinding and sudden, like lightning in the back of her skull. She was 9, and she had spilled a glass of milk. It wasn't even a full glass. Half, maybe. But the ceramic cup had slipped through her fingers and shattered on the kitchen tile. And the moment it hit the floor, she gasped. Not because of the sound, but because of the silence that came after. And then came the footsteps. Click, click, click. Heels on tile. Calm. Too calm. Carla appeared in the doorway with a look that was almost blank, except for the jaw. Tight and twitching. She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she said, "You always do this." "I'm sorry," Savannah had whispered, already backing away. "I told you to be careful. I told you what would happen if." "I didn't mean to." "You never mean to, Savannah." And then the hand came down, Fast. Flat. Across the mouth. The taste of copper bloomed on her tongue. Her head whipped sideways. Savannah had stumbled backward, tripping over the corner of the rug. Her tiny hands scrambled along the kitchen floor until she found the edge of the counter. She pulled herself up and ran. Not out the door, not down the street, but under the bed. She'd crawled into the dark space beneath her bed, pulling her knees to her chest, heart thudding so hard it drowned out the rest of the world. She didn't cry. Cry made it worse. Carla followed, knelt by the edge of the mattress. Didn't scream, didn't beg, just whispered, low and cold, "You make me do this. I didn't want to, but you make me." It was always the same line, the same threat disguised as love. That night, Savannah slept under the bed. She woke up with dust in her nose and the smell of milk still sour in the air. And she never spoke of it, not to a teacher, not to a neighbor, not even to her real father, who had vanished years ago, because Carla had said, "If you tell anyone, they'll take you away. They'll lock you in a hospital, and no one will love you after that." So Savannah learned early, love was violent. Love was secret. Love didn't protect you. It punished you, then told you it was for your own good. And when Liam raised his voice, when he gripped her wrist too tight, when he said, "You owe me," something inside her didn't register danger. It registered normal. That's why she didn't scream louder. That's why she didn't run. Because somewhere deep inside her, a 9-year-old girl was still hiding under the bed, thinking, maybe if I don't move, it won't get worse. But it always got worse. Elaine frowned. "Who's Liam?" Silence. Savannah's eyes welled up. She turned her head away. Later that evening, detectives returned to speak with her, but Savannah was in and out of lucidity. When asked directly about Liam, she flinched and muttered something under her breath that sounded like, "I told him no." Detective Knox made a note. Back at the crime lab, a match came in at 3:12 a.m. Liam Cross, age 22, male, Austin resident, no criminal record, no known gang activity, a high school dropout with sporadic employment, and, according to DMV records, the registered boyfriend of Savannah Lynn. He'd been reported missing 9 days ago by his sister. No active investigation had been opened. That changed now. By sunrise, his photo was on Knox's desk. Tall, mixed race, buzz cut, tattoos on both forearms. He looked cocky, young, full of bad decisions. "Savannah Lynn just became our primary suspect," Knox muttered, sipping cold coffee. But View wasn't so sure. What kind of woman kills her boyfriend, cuts off 3 fingers, and hides them inside herself, and then walks around for a week like nothing happened? Knox raised an eyebrow. The kind that wants to bury the truth where no one would ever think to look. Or maybe, just maybe, she didn't put them there at all. And that was the part that kept View awake long after she left the hospital. Because Savannah's eyes, they didn't look like the eyes of a killer. They looked like someone who didn't even know what she'd survived. Savannah didn't speak for the next 48 hours. Not to her nurse, not to the detectives, not even to the psychiatrist who sat across from her with a clipboard and a soft voice, coaxing her with questions like a mother trying to get a child to confess who broke the vase. Nothing. Just silence. And eyes that stared straight ahead like they were still watching something only she could see. The only thing she said, barely audible, barely human, was that one name, Liam. By the 3rd morning, she was stable enough to be moved out of ICU into a private hospital room, with a police guard stationed outside the door. Her name was all over the news now, not just local but national, TikTok, Reddit threads, even morning talk shows. Everyone had a theory. Did she kill her boyfriend in a moment of rage and hide the evidence in her body? Was she the victim of a horrific abuse no one was willing to believe? Was she possessed, disturbed, mentally broken? Or was she just evil? But the girl at the center of it all, curled up in a hospital bed in a too-big gown, clutching a pillow like it was the only thing tethering her to earth, offered nothing. Detective Dana View stood at the foot of that bed and watched her for a long time. Savannah had lost weight in just days, her skin pale and sickly, her lips dry, her hair clinging to the sweat on her forehead. She looked less like a criminal and more like a patient in a psychiatric ward. Someone who'd seen something so awful. Her brain had shut the door and thrown away the key. Dana didn't say anything. She just watched. Sometimes, silence told more than a confession. Back at the precinct, Riley Knox was digging. Hard. He pulled every record he could find on Liam Cross. He dropped out of high school his junior year after being suspended 3 times for fighting. No juvenile record, but a pattern: violent outbursts, aggressive behavior, emotional volatility. One teacher had even filed a report for suspected abuse at home, but it went nowhere. Liam's adult record was clean, but that didn't mean his hands were. Ex-girlfriends posted cryptic tweets. A few had restraining orders that never made it to court. One girl, only 17 at the time, had posted online that Liam ruined me, but never filed charges. Knox read it all, took notes. His gut was starting to turn. Then came the interview with Gina Prescott, Savannah's roommate. I haven't seen him since maybe 2 Fridays ago, Gina said, curled on the edge of the interrogation room chair, like she didn't want to touch anything. He was loud, always had something to say, always criticizing Savannah, her clothes, her friends, how she acted. He made her cry a lot. Was he ever violent? Gina hesitated. Once, maybe twice, I heard something, like slapping, but Savannah would never admit it. She'd just say, "It's okay, I pushed him first." She protected him, even when he didn't deserve it. Tell us about the night he disappeared. Gina drew in a shaky breath. I wasn't there. I went to visit my sister for the weekend. I left Friday afternoon. Savannah was alone. She said she was going to break up with him. She looked terrified. Knox and View shared a glance. There were no security cameras in the dorm hallways, budget cuts. The one camera outside the entrance had been offline that night due to a maintenance ticket that was never resolved. Convenient. But someone else had seen Liam that night. Marcus Griggs, the RA for the floor, had noticed him hanging around outside the building around midnight. He was pacing, Marcus said, like he was working himself up for something. I was about to go talk to him, but then he buzzed in, someone let him up, and I figured, okay, maybe they made up. But that was the last time anyone saw Liam Cross. And no one had seen him leave. No rideshare history. No car on file. No public transit tap-ins. No cell phone activity. His phone had stopped pinging towers around 1:17 a.m. The next day, Savannah had vomited twice and told her dorm supervisor she wasn't feeling well. She skipped class that Monday, canceled a dentist appointment on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, her stomach pain began. All signs pointed to something happening that night, something violent. But no blood was ever found in the dorm room. No smell. No signs of struggle. Until forensics turned up a faint stain in the shower drain, under the tile, too small to be noticed. Liam's blood. Only a trace, but enough. That same day, Savannah's chart was updated. A CT scan had shown bruising on her left ribs and a hairline fracture in her pelvis. Old but not ancient. A mark on her neck that could have been a thumbprint. The signs were there. The body told its story even when the mouth wouldn't. Detective View sat down with Savannah again that evening. No recorder. No lawyer. Just 2 women in a quiet room. She didn't ask about the fingers. She didn't ask about Liam. She just said, "You look tired." Savannah blinked slowly. Then, for the first time, she spoke a full sentence. "I didn't mean for it to happen." Dana didn't move. Savannah swallowed hard, her voice so hoarse it barely qualified as speech. "I told him to stop. I said no. I said it over and over. But he said I owed him, that I'd let him on, that he wasn't leaving until he got what he came for. Dana felt her chest tighten. Savannah stared down at her trembling hands. And then he hit me, and I screamed, and I remember the taste of blood in my mouth. And then I bit him. She looked up at Dana with eyes full of something that wasn't quite tears, but not dry either. I don't remember anything after that. Outside the room, Knox paced. The girl wasn't lying. He could feel it. But if she wasn't the one who dismembered Liam and shoved his fingers inside her, then who the hell did? And why? Because something about this wasn't just brutal. It was deliberate. The Friday Liam disappeared had started out ordinary. Gina had packed her duffel to head to her sister's in Dallas. Savannah had been quiet all morning, quieter than usual, but not upset. She'd helped Gina carry her bags downstairs, hugged her goodbye, and promised she'd lock up behind her. "Are you going to be okay?" Gina had asked, already sensing something. Savannah forced a smile. "I'm just going to talk to him. That's all." By the time the sun dipped below the Austin skyline, Savannah was alone in the dorm room, sitting on the edge of her bed, fully dressed but with her shoes still off. Her hands kept tightening around the edge of her blanket as she stared at the locked door. She had texted Liam just once that day. "Can we talk tonight?" His response had been immediate. "Be there 11. Don't ignore me this time." She never replied. At 10:42 p.m., Liam Cross was seen pacing in front of the dorm building by Marcus Griggs, the RA. Marcus was doing his usual rounds, but paused at the glass entrance to watch Liam outside. Liam wasn't wearing a jacket. It was a chilly night for spring, but he looked wired, shoulders stiff, head jerking toward his phone every few seconds like he was waiting for something more than permission. At 10:58 p.m., someone buzzed him in. He didn't sign the guest log. Upstairs, Savannah had already unlocked the door. When he knocked, she hesitated before opening it. Just a crack. "You said you wanted to talk," Liam muttered, pushing the door open wider with his palm before she could resist. "So talk." Inside the room, there was a sharp tension, a mix of anxiety, frustration, and something darker. Savannah had written down notes in a spiral notebook. Phrases like, "You don't own me," "This isn't love," "Please stop." But when she tried to read them out loud, her voice shook. She stumbled. Liam laughed. "You rehearsed this?" "Please, Liam. I'm done. I mean it." He sat on the desk chair, legs spread, arms crossed. "What are you talking about? We're good. We always fight like this." "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." And then came the silence. Liam stood. The sound of the chair scraping against the tile made her flinch. He walked toward her slow, calculated. "You think you're better than me now?" "No." "You think you can just tell me to go, after everything I did for you?" His voice grew sharper, his steps closer. She backed up until her spine hit the wall. "I gave you everything," he hissed, now nose to nose with her. "You don't get to walk away from me. You owe me. You said you love me, so you're going to act like it." What happened next was a blur. There were no cameras in the room, no witnesses, only the outline of events pieced together later from bruises, from broken tiles, from shattered memories. But there were sounds. A neighbor across the hall, Emma Norris, later testified hearing a loud thump around 11:17 p.m., followed by a muffled scream. She assumed it was a couple having rough sex or a late-night argument. Nothing unusual in a college dorm. By 11:30 p.m., everything was quiet again. Too quiet. Savannah wouldn't remember the exact moment she bit him. Only the blood, the metallic taste, the pain in her jaw, the way he cried out in shock and tried to pull away, the sound of something snapping, then a flash of white light as her head hit the corner of the dresser when she fell. The next thing she remembered was waking up on the bathroom floor around 2 a.m., sticky and sore, barely able to sit up. There was no sign of Liam, no blood, no smell, only silence. She showered, cleaned everything she could, scrubbed the floor, wiped the walls, threw out her bed sheets. Her hands moved on autopilot, but her mind was disconnected, floating somewhere above the room, far away from what had just happened. Somehow, in her haze, she convinced herself he had left. He got angry. He left. That's what he always did. Maybe he punched a wall. Maybe he stormed out. That's all. But her body said otherwise. Her pain grew each day. It was deep and raw and inexplicable. She had a low-grade fever by Sunday. Monday, she stayed in bed. Tuesday, she tried to walk to the dining hall, but collapsed halfway there. By Wednesday, she was vomiting bile. Gina called 911 by Thursday morning, and the fingers were still inside her. Whoever had taken Liam, whoever had cut those pieces from him, had done more than mutilate a body. They had hidden the evidence in the most unimaginable place, knowing no one would look there until it was too late. The question was, did Savannah do it herself, or did someone do it to her? Because by Friday evening, the same night she had said goodbye to Liam forever, someone else had entered that dorm room. Someone she didn't remember. Someone she didn't see. But someone who had cleaned the blood and left behind something much worse. The forensics lab had never received anything quite like it. 3 severed human fingers, partially decomposed, extracted from the vaginal canal of a living woman. They were delivered in sterile bags marked with biohazard warnings and sealed tighter than most murder weapons. The attending pathologist, Dr. Felix Cho, had been in the field for over a decade. He'd reconstructed skulls, pieced together victims from swamps and car trunks. But this was obscene, intimate. It felt personal. He laid the fingers out under cool surgical light. The flesh was bloated, waterlogged from internal exposure, but there was enough tissue left to test. The index finger with a warped silver ring caught his attention. The ring had initials carved on the inside. LC. DNA analysis was expedited. A partial blood sample from the fractured knuckle provided confirmation within 24 hours. The fingers belonged to Liam Cross. The manner of dismemberment suggested a bite or sharp trauma. There were jagged tear lines, not clean cuts. One finger looked to have been broken at the joint before being severed. There was also evidence of deep lacerations on the skin, possibly from fingernails. Embedded under the skin of the middle finger, they found epithelial cells that matched Savannah's DNA. That gave prosecutors their theory. Savannah fought back. Bit him. Then what? Killed him? Cut off his fingers, and what? Shoved them inside herself? Even Detective Riley Knox didn't buy it. Not completely. This doesn't make sense, he muttered to his partner Dana View, flipping through the crime lab report at his desk. You don't kill someone in self-defense, chop their fingers off, and hide them in your own damn uterus. View leaned over the file. What if she didn't know they were in there? Knox gave her a look. You're saying someone else put them inside her while she was unconscious? Dana didn't answer right away. Instead, she brought up the talk screen from Savannah's ER file. There were trace amounts of ketamine in her system, she said. Not enough for full anesthesia, but enough to make her disoriented. Could have been slipped in food or a drink. Knox nodded slowly. So we're not dealing with a clean murder. We're dealing with a cover-up. A message. Something meant to look a certain way. But why the fingers? Why inside her? Dana said nothing for a long time, until finally. Because it's not about disposal. It's about shame. Knox stared at her. She told me he assaulted her. Dana continued. That she said no. That he didn't listen. What if someone close, knew what happened and wanted to destroy her from the inside out? It was a brutal idea. Too brutal, but not impossible. Still, they needed a body. Without one, the state had nothing but partial DNA, circumstantial trauma, and the word of a traumatized girl. So they started digging. They retraced Liam's last digital footprint. His phone had stopped pinging at 1:17 a.m. on the night of his disappearance. That put him still in the dorm, or very close. A geofence warrant gave them access to nearby Bluetooth signals, and one, briefly, had picked up a nearby smartwatch that hadn't been active since. A search of the university dumpster area turned up a burned gray hoodie and a torn Nike sneaker, both confirmed to belong to Liam. The hoodie had blood on the inside of the sleeve, as if someone had used it to apply pressure to a wound. But still, no torso, no limbs, no face. The missing persons report was updated. National databases were notified. Ebola went out to hospitals, morgues, and even the Mexican border. But Liam Cross had vanished in a thin air. And yet, somehow, his voice lingered. While reviewing Liam's personal laptop, recovered from his sister's apartment, the digital forensics unit found a folder named Unsent. Inside were 4 Word documents. Most were rambling notes, half thoughts, half confessions. But one stood out. It was titled simply, "For Her," dated the morning of the day he disappeared. It read, "Savannah, I don't even know if you'll read this. I probably won't even send it. You don't talk to me anymore, not really. You flinch when I touch you. You sleep with one eye open. I notice. I pretend I don't, but I do. I hate that you make me feel small. I hate that when you smile at someone else, I want to break their jaw. I know that's messed up, but I also know you made me feel seen once. And I'm chasing that ghost now like a damn addict. I don't know how to love you without hurting you. And I think you know that, too. Maybe you're better off without me. Maybe you always were. But God, I wish you'd just look at me the way you used to. Even just one more time. Liam." Detective Dana View read the letter twice. Then again, it didn't change anything. It didn't excuse the bruises or the threats or the fear Savannah had lived with. But it explained something deeper. Liam wasn't just a monster. He was a broken boy drowning in his own need. And while Savannah had bled in silence, he had drowned in it. Knox placed the printout of the letter into the case file, quietly. No one ever read it aloud in court. But Savannah was given a copy. She read it alone, in the hospital, under soft lamplight. And when she finished, she didn't cry. She just folded the letter in half, set it on the windowsill, and whispered, "I forgive you, but I will never forget you." Meanwhile, Savannah remained under a soft hold, not formally arrested, but not free to leave either. Her room had been sealed as a crime scene. Her laptop, phone, and private journals were taken into evidence. Her parents had not arrived. She had no father in her life, and her mother, Carla Lynn, had only recently remarried and now lived in El Paso. It was Carla who finally came to visit Savannah, 6 days after the hospital admission. Savannah was propped up in bed, still pale, still slow-moving, when her mother walked in. Carla was stiff, immaculately dressed, with hair pulled into a perfect bun and eyes that didn't match her daughter's in warmth or in sadness. She looked more annoyed than concerned. Savannah's lips trembled when she saw her. "Mom!" But Carla didn't hug her. Instead, she set her purse down and said, "What the hell did you do?" Savannah shrank. I didn't. You're all over the news," Carla hissed. "They're calling you a killer. A freak. Do you even understand what this has done to me? To you?" Savannah's voice cracked. The nurse outside the room, overhearing through the cracked door, quietly flipped on the recorder she kept in her pocket. Standard procedure for hostile relatives. Savannah tried again. "I didn't do anything. I don't even remember. There was blood. I blacked out. And then, you don't remember?" Carla snapped. "Convenient." Then she leaned in, lowering her voice, just loud enough for the nurse to still hear. "You better keep your mouth shut. You think this is bad? You haven't seen bad. And if you bring me down with you," she paused, her smile tight and cold, "I promise you, girl, you will wish you died with him." Savannah froze. She didn't say another word, but her hands started shaking. She pulled her hospital blanket higher, like it could hide her from the woman she once called Mom. Outside the room, The nurse turned off her recorder and quietly called the detectives. Detectives Riley Knox and Dana View didn't hesitate. They drove straight to the hospital after the nurse called. Her voice on the line had been calm, but the urgency beneath it was unmistakable. She threatened her, the nurse had said. It wasn't yelling. It was cold, like she'd done it before. By the time they arrived, Carla Lynn was already gone. Surveillance showed she'd left the hospital minutes after the confrontation, walking briskly, not looking back. Not to the nurse, not to her daughter. Savannah, on the other hand, had shut down completely. Her eyes were vacant again, lips slightly parted but unmoving. The nurse said she hadn't spoken since her mother left the room. Just sat there, trembling, holding the blanket like it was armor. Dana sat with her for nearly an hour. No questions, no pressure, just stillness. Then quietly she asked, "Did your mom ever hurt you?" At first, Savannah didn't blink, but slowly something changed. Her jaw tightened, her breathing picked up just slightly, and then came the smallest nod. Dana reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She showed Savannah the photo of Liam's ring. The silver one recovered on the severed finger, engraved with initials. She watched Savannah's eyes as they locked onto it. Tears welled. "I gave him that," she whispered. "Do you remember what happened that night?" Savannah blinked slowly. "I remember him hitting me. I remember trying to run." She looked away. Then someone else was there. Dana leaned forward. "Who?" "I don't know. I thought I was dreaming. There was a shadow. A smell. Perfume." Dana's heart stopped. "What kind of perfume?" Savannah shook her head. "Cheap, like something from a gas station. But strong." It filled the room. Detective Knox pulled Carla Lynn's file that night. There wasn't much. A single DUI 10 years ago. A complaint filed by a former co-worker for aggressive behavior. No charges. Nothing concrete. But when they pulled Savannah's medical history, the pattern became clearer. Between the ages of 7 and 14, Savannah had been in the ER 7 times. Broken wrist, concussion, dislocated shoulder, bruised ribs. Each time, Carla Lynn had signed the paperwork. Each time, the incident was chalked up to rough play, accident on the playground, fell down the stairs. Knox's gut twisted. They requested child services records. They had to go through court, but once they got them, it painted an ugly picture. When Savannah was 11, a neighbor had anonymously reported suspicious bruising and screaming at night coming from the Lynn household. A social worker visited. Carla answered the door. Savannah stood behind her, silent. Case closed 2 days later. No evidence of abuse. Because Savannah hadn't said a word. Now, over a decade later, she was still doing the same. Keeping silent to protect a woman who had slowly, methodically erased her voice. But something else was wrong. How did Carla even get into the dorm that night? She lived 3 hours away in El Paso. There was no record of her visiting campus. No keycard swipe, no surveillance. Unless she'd been in Austin that night for another reason. Knox dug deeper. Rental car logs, hotel records, credit card receipts. And then they found it. A hotel reservation under the name Carol Lean, a classic low-effort alias. Checked in at a motel 6 blocks from campus on the same Friday night Liam disappeared. Paid in cash. Surveillance showed a woman matching Carla's height and bill checking in around 9:45 p.m. But the real shock came when they pulled the footage of her leaving the next morning. She was wearing gloves and carrying a large black duffel bag. When questioned, Carla denied everything. She told them she had been at home, in bed, that she hadn't seen Savannah in months, and that she only came to Austin after she saw the story on the news. When they mentioned the hotel, she shrugged. "I travel for work." That could have been any weekend. Knox stared her down. "You stayed a total of 8 hours. No check bags. Left with more than you came in with. You didn't even shower." She smirked. So, well, maybe I had a bad date. And the gloves? I like to be safe. Did you kill Liam Cross? She laughed. Do I look like someone who could chop up a man? Knox didn't respond. Because yes. Yes, she did. Back at the lab, they finally got a break. A partial palm print had been found on the ring finger, impressed faintly into the dried blood on the band. Too smudged to match conclusively, but it had ridges, and it didn't belong to Savannah. When they cross-checked it with Carla's prints from her DUI arrest, partial match, enough for a warrant. They arrested her 2 days later. She didn't resist, didn't flinch when they read her rights. She just looked at Savannah, who had come to the station that morning, trembling but determined, and said with eerie calm, "You think they'll believe you? After everything I've cleaned up for you? You think you're better off without me?" Savannah didn't respond. She just stared at the woman who had raised her, who had broken her, who had left her with rot inside her body and called it protection. And for the first time in her life, she didn't look afraid. She looked free. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back walls, their cameras banned from filming, but their pens racing with every word. True crime podcasts had staked out the front steps of the Travis County Courthouse for weeks. TikTokers reenacted key moments using court transcripts, while cable news anchors argued nightly about who the real victim was, the girl who survived the horror, or the mother who claimed she saved her daughter from monster. The state of Texas versus Carla Lynn had become more than just a murder trial. It had become a referendum on motherhood, trauma, self-defense, and justice. Savannah Lynn took the stand on the 4th day. She looked smaller in person than she had in the photos the media recycled. A thin girl in a gray blazer and soft shoes, her hair tied back simply, no makeup, no jewelry. Her hands trembled slightly when she raised them to swear in, but when she spoke, her voice was clear. "I didn't remember it at first," she said. "Not until after the doctors showed me what they'd found inside me." She paused. The room was silent. "I thought Liam had hurt me. I thought I might have killed him trying to get away. But I didn't know he was dead. I didn't know his fingers were," she swallowed, "in me." The jury flinched, almost as one. The prosecutor, 88 Lindsay Koenig, paced slowly, giving the courtroom a moment to recover before she continued. "Savannah," she said softly, "can you tell the court what you remembered about your mother?" Savannah stared ahead, not at the prosecutor, not at the judge, straight ahead. She was there. The night it happened. More murmurs. The judge banged his gavel. "I didn't see her face at first. Just her silhouette. I thought I was hallucinating. I was in pain. I was bleeding. Liam was on the floor, groaning. He was still alive." She shook slightly, and then she knelt beside me and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Koenig stepped closer. Did she ever explain what that meant? Savannah nodded, her voice quieter now. "The next morning, I asked her. She said, 'You don't need to remember. You just need to keep your mouth shut.'" Carla Lynn sat at the defense table in a navy suit, arms crossed. She didn't blink as her daughter spoke. Her face, expertly Botoxed, was unreadable. The only movement was a slow flexing of her jaw muscle, over and over. The defense, led by attorney Jordan Kimball, a media-savvy firebrand who'd once defended an Austin cop accused of murder, argued that Carla had been forced into a no-win situation. She found her daughter nearly dead, assaulted, bleeding. He told the jury in his opening statement. And when she saw what that boy had done, what he was about to do again, she made a choice. A mother's choice. His argument wasn't insanity. It wasn't even self-defense. It was defense of others. He painted Carla as a woman who had grown up in a system that failed her, who'd seen abuse firsthand, and who had vowed never to let it touch her child. She hadn't called 911 because, in her words, they never come in time. Not for girls like Savannah. When pressed about the dismemberment, Kimball didn't flinch. She panicked. She believed the law would never believe her daughter. And so she made a terrible, desperate decision, one she regrets deeply. But it was born out of love. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Prosecution had a different story. They argued that Carla had orchestrated the cover-up to maintain control over Savannah, the same way she had since childhood. They revealed texts Carla had sent to Savannah months earlier, manipulative, cold messages like, "I'm the only one who's ever cleaned up after your messes. You don't get to fail and run away. You owe me." They showed the jury evidence that Carla had booked a hotel room 6 blocks from Savannah's dorm under a fake name. They presented security footage of her leaving that room early the next morning wearing gloves and carrying a duffel bag. The defense tried to argue it proved nothing. But then came the bombshell. A janitor from the university campus came forward. He had never spoken to police. He was undocumented and afraid. But he told the court, through a translator, that he saw a woman matching Carla's description enter the dorm building at 2 a.m. using an old visitor pass. She had keys, he said. She looked like she'd been there before. And then the medical examiner returned to the stand. Dr. Felix Cho testified that the fingers had been placed inside Savannah's vaginal canal post-mortem, at least 4 hours after death. That they'd been cleaned of most blood, but not entirely. That the insertion had been intentional, forceful, and symbolic. It wasn't disposal. It was punishment. "I've seen some sick things," Dr. Cho said, but this was designed to silence her. From the inside out. The jury looked pale. The nation was divided. Half of the country called Carla Lynn a monster, a manipulative abuser who had turned her daughter into a human crime scene. The other half called her a mother pushed past the breaking point, a vigilante in a world that didn't protect girls like Savannah. By the end of the second week, the trial had been dubbed the Womb Witness case. Savannah's name trended every day on Twitter. Online forums debated whether she was brainwashed, complicit, or simply a broken girl piecing herself back together. And then it was time for closing arguments. Koenig stood before the jury, her voice heavy but controlled. "Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't leave pieces of a corpse inside someone who's already suffered. Love doesn't erase someone's memory and call it protection. That wasn't a mother saving her child. That was a woman who needed to control the story, and she rewrote it with blood." Kimball stood up in rebuttal, pounding his hand on the podium. She protected her. Maybe not in the way any of us would have. Maybe not perfectly, but she did what she had to do. She didn't put those fingers in her out of hate. She did it out of panic, out of love. Can you honestly say you'd have done better? The jury deliberated for 32 hours. When they returned, the air in the courtroom was electric. 2 days before the verdict, Savannah agreed to visit her mother. The request had come through Carla's public defender. Unexpected and at first unwanted. Savannah had ignored it. For hours, maybe longer. But something gnawed at her, something unfinished. Not forgiveness, not closure, just a need to look her in the eyes. They brought her through the secure wing of the Travis County Detention Center. No cameras, no microphones, just a sealed visitation room with 2 metal chairs and a scratched plexiglass divider. But Carla had requested direct contact. No barrier. Savannah hesitated when she walked in. Carla was already seated, dressed in the beige pre-trial jumpsuit. Her hair, usually immaculate, was pulled back hastily. No makeup. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes still sharp, still watching like she was measuring weakness. Savannah sat across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Carla leaned forward and said, voice low, "You look thin. Are they feeding you?" Savannah said nothing. Carla smiled tightly. "You always did stop eating when you were stressed." Still nothing. She shifted in her seat. "You know, this trial is a joke. A media circus. You think any of those people care about you? You think when this is over, They'll still talk about you. You're just their new tragedy. Savannah blinked. Maybe. Carla scoffed. I protected you. Every time you got in over your head, every time you fell apart, I cleaned it up. Just like I did when you were 9, 13, 17, and now this. Her voice rose slightly, a sharp edge creeping in. You let that boy use you, and then you let him ruin you. And you froze, Savannah. You always freeze. I had to fix it. Again. Savannah's eyes finally lifted. Calm. Steady. You didn't fix anything, she said softly. Carla narrowed her eyes. You would have gone to prison. You still might. Don't think those prosecutors care about your little trauma sob story. You needed me. I needed a mother, Savannah replied. Not a cleaner. Carla's jaw clenched. You didn't save me, Savannah continued. You silenced me. You made me think I deserved it. You taught me to hide, to shrink, and then you put his fingers inside me and called it love. Carla's hand twitched on the table. You don't understand what I've done for you. No, Savannah said firmly. I do. That's why I'm here. A pause. Savannah leaned forward now, matching her mother's intensity. I remember everything, Carla. Not just Liam. Not just the blood. I remember you. I remember the milk glass. The belt. The bruises. The night you told me no one would ever love a broken girl. Carla's mouth parted. The first crack. Savannah didn't stop. You made me think pain was normal. That violence was affection. That silence was safety. You made me carry your shame. And when I couldn't anymore, you carved it into my body. Tears welled in her eyes now, but they didn't fall. I'm done carrying it. Carla was quiet. For the first time, she looked smaller. Older, but only for a second. Then she sat back, scoffing, voice bitter. You think you're better than me now? You think they'll make you a hero? You're still weak, Savannah. You always were. Savannah stood. She didn't respond. She didn't need to, because silence was no longer her prison. It was her power. At the door, before the guard let her out, Carla said one last thing. I gave you life. Savannah turned her head, just enough to whisper back. And you spent it trying to take it away. Then she walked out, and left Carla alone in a room that had finally, fully gone quiet. They found Carla Lynn guilty on all counts. Second-degree murder, desecration of a corpse, obstruction of justice, and felony child endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 47 years without the possibility of parole. Savannah didn't cry when the sentence was read. She didn't flinch when Carla was led away in shackles. She just closed her eyes and finally exhaled. The trial was over, but Savannah Lynn's story wasn't. The cameras eventually moved on. The podcast hosts chased their next shocking headline. The true crime Reddit threads cooled. The nation, once obsessed with the wound witness case, forgot. But Savannah didn't. She couldn't. Some nights, she would still wake up gasping, her hand clutching at her stomach, as if something were still inside. Not the fingers. Something worse. The echo of what had been done to her. The absence of what she would never get back. 4 months after the verdict, she stayed in a small trauma recovery center just outside Houston. The walls were white. The air smelled like lavender and antiseptic. The therapists were kind. The silence was tolerable. And then, one rainy morning in March, something cracked open. She was sitting by the window, tracing raindrops down the glass, when a memory returned. Not a scream, not a slap, not the moment of pain, but the moment after. She remembered Carla's face hovering over her, lit by the dull yellow light of the dorm room. Her expression wasn't frantic. It wasn't maternal. It was cold, methodical. She remembered her mother saying, "Don't make me clean this up for you again." She remembered trying to speak, trying to say, "He hurt me." And Carla, kneeling beside Liam's bleeding body, saying simply, "No, no, sweetie. This is your fault now." Savannah dropped the glass of water in her hand. It shattered. She didn't even flinch. That night, she wrote a letter. Not to the court, not to the press, not to Carla, to herself. She wrote, "You weren't crazy. You weren't dirty. You were never the problem. They try to make you forget. They try to make you carry it for them. But your body remembered. It always remembered. And now you do too." She signed it with her full name, Savannah Elise Lynn, for the first time in years. And she cried. Not the kind of tears that fall like surrender, but the kind that wash the blood off. 2 weeks later, she moved to California under a different name, enrolled in a small liberal arts college where no one knew her history. She studied psychology and forensic trauma. She volunteered at shelters for abused women. When asked why she came to speak at high schools and survivors groups, she never told them everything. She just said, "Because I was buried once. And somehow I survived." Carla Lynn remained incarcerated in a maximum security facility. She refused to speak to the press. She never appealed. She never admitted guilt. But once, years later, a former cellmate told a reporter from The Atlantic that Carla had whispered in the dark of their shared cell, "I only ever taught her how to survive. The world was always going to eat her alive." The article went viral, but Savannah never responded. She had learned that some stories don't need revisiting. Some monsters don't deserve screen time. What mattered was this. She remembered. And in remembering, she reclaimed something that had once been stolen. Her voice, her body, her truth. Savannah Lynn would never be whole again. But she was no longer hollow. And that, for her, was enough.